Again, if you picked this up, either a paper copy in person, or if you're looking at the copies of worksheets that are online, there is a review sheet that as we go over and finish that last page of notes on the New Deal before we get into World War II, which I'm going to save all that for next week. Just make sure that you're keeping up with your daily bell ringers. You're using the next couple of days to finish everything. IDs and SQs, your packets, this review sheet, bell ringers, going over the PowerPoints, watching the videos that go along with the PowerPoints. That'll be sufficient enough for this, and then next week is World War II stuff. And next week I'm just going to intro into it. I'm not going to go too in depth because, fingers crossed, we'll be back together after that. So the New Deal sheet, and I apologize, it doesn't really matter if you have it a paper copy or if you have the digital copy. It's been copied and recopied, that it's pretty faded. So we're going to go over, I'm going to get you started on it, and then I do want you to do some of this by yourself. So we're going to work on it and go through it together. And I'm actually going to read through a little bit of what it's talking about because it's a great review for what we've been learning even last week and this week. So we know that Herbert Hoover was president at the very start of all this. He believed that the country would soon recover on its own, and this was his idea of rugged individualism, that we didn't need to throw government assistance, because he really believed that if we did it, people would become reliant on it and they wouldn't get back to work. But the economy was in such a bad shape that we really had to have it. So we know that election 1932, Roosevelt comes in, industrial production had fallen to new lows, the nation's banking system was near collapse. Many workers had lost their jobs. Most Americans believed that a change in leadership would solve the problem. They voted overwhelmingly for FDR, giving him 472 electoral votes to only 59 for Hoover, who did run for re-election. A lot of it, I think, was just because he wanted to make sure that people didn't think that he believed it was all his fault, which it wasn't. It was the economy. He just should have done more to try and stop it from hitting rock bottom like it did. In his first inaugural address, Roosevelt told the American people that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Don't forget that quote. That's a quiz question for when we return. He wanted to end feelings of panic and assure the nation that steps would soon be taken to strengthen the economy. Roosevelt sought advice from his cabinet and also consulted with a group of scholars and other professionals that became nicknamed the Brain Trust. Roosevelt and his advisors, along with Congress, put forth a series of measures that together were known as the New Deal. The first few months of his presidency, called the first 100 days, saw a flurry of government activity, efforts to pull the country out of the Great Depression that will continue through the 1930s. The New Deal did not end the Depression, but it did turn the economy around. The gross national product, consumer spending, and the number of Americans without jobs steadily improved between 1933 and 1939, which is the time we're talking about right now. The Great Depression finally came to an end during World War II, 1939 to 1945, when the government spent huge sums of money on war materials and millions of people went back to work. We talked about that. War's not a good thing, but for this point in time, it actually pulled us out of the Great Depression. New laws were passed and government agencies created to help solve the many serious problems caused by the Great Depression. Paragraph 1 below tells about one of the actions taken by FDR and Congress during the New Deal era. Decide which law or government agency in the list is being described. Write your answer in the space. Complete numbers 2 through 12 in the same way. So we're going to do a couple together, and then I want you to finish on your own. I'm actually going to bounce around. I'm not going to give them to you all in order. I'm going to make you work for it just a little bit. Okay, let's see. Let's go to number 2. It was the first New Deal program aimed at putting people back to work. Some 2.5 million young men planted about 17 million acres of trees, built dams, and improved the national parks. For this one, I'm going to have you put the CCC, Conservation, the Civilian Conservation Corps. Now, how do I know that it's not talking about the TVA, which also did the same or similar things? And I told you last week you would know the difference, because anything talking about the TVA, which by the way helped build the Blue Ridge Parkway, is going to be something that defines establishing electricity. So I'm actually going to go to the back side, and let's do number 6. This law established the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the FDIC, which guaranteed that the federal government would repay depositors who lost money when banks failed. And this one is talking about the Emergency Banking Relief Act, or the EBRA. If you want to put initials, that's fine too. Okay, that was 6. We've done 2 and 6 so far. Let's go and do which one do I want? How about all right, we'll do number 10. It says it was the most important labor law of the New Deal period. It upheld the right of workers to organize unions, bargain collectively. The National Labor Relations Board was established to deal with workers' complaints of unfair practices. The law was also called the Wagner Act because it was sponsored by Senator Robert F. Wagner of New York. So that is number 10, and number 10 is talking about, hold on, give me just a second. The National Industrial Recovery Act. So again, you could put the NIRA. That's fine. Just make sure you know what it stands for, the National Industrial Recovery Act. Let's do just a couple more together. I mean, there's only 12 plus a couple of free response. So we've done 3 so far. We'll do just a couple more. Let's do number 11. To help elderly Americans during the Great Depression, monthly payments were made to retired workers or their survivors. Money also distributed to workers who lost their jobs and for the care of the dependent and crippled children. This, believe it or not, is talking about the Social Security Act, and that's the modifications that were made to it. That it was not just a pension for the elderly, but was also there to help with anybody that had dependents, young children, maybe the father passed away or the mother passed away and they're down in income, or a child that was born with disabilities, or maybe a parent that has a disability. So that's the Social Security Act. Let's do another one. Let's do number 4 on the front. Congress passed legislation which granted payments to farmers who agreed not to grow wheat, corn, tobacco, and certain other crops. With fewer crops being produced, farm prices went up and farmers were better off. You better know that one. I've talked about it several times. That is the AAA, also known as the Agricultural Adjustment Act. All right, let's see. How about, for kicks and giggles, we do just one more and then you finish up and do the free response at the bottom. Let's do number 12. This was the last major reform under the New Deal. It was a minimum wage of 25 cents and a maximum work week of 44 hours. Industries involved in interstate commerce were forbidden to hire children under the age of 16. The law was also known as the Wages and Hours Act, and you should know that one. We've talked about that one several times already. That is the Fair Labor Standards Act. So we went through and did several together. Just make sure that you either made yourself a mark of what we've already done, and you wrap up the rest. All right, good job. Do some review, learn something.